to another episode of my House Flipper 2 series. Today we are taking a look at Tudor College, and to help me out with this, I have a Tudorian expert.
No, I'm not an expert.
At least somebody who's more expert than I am. My lovely wife Lily is with us today.
Hi.
And she'll be helping us to walk through the house, explain some of the history and reasons why behind a lot of the houses at this period, and we'll go from there.
So I wanted to give a brief behind the scenes of what the Tudor period actually is before we get started. It occurred after the Battle of Bosworth, where Henry Tudor VII, who's Henry VII, defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth. And you can read more into the War of the Roses and why that started, but Henry Tudor had based his claim on a couple of reasons why he became king. He was actually his father was actually the stepbrother to the previous Lancastrian king Henry VI, and through his mother, not his father, which makes the claim a little dubious. He also has a claim through his mother, through John of Gaunt, Margaret Beaufort. She was one of the richest women in England at the time, and she married Edmund Tudor, his father, gave birth to Henry at 13. So even then they thought that was young. He also married Elizabeth of York, who was the daughter of the previous York king before Richard, which was his brother, so she was the niece to Richard III as well. And this gave him claim, and he also has claim for conquest because he defeated the king in battle, the previous king in battle. So the Tudor period runs from Henry VII to Elizabeth I. The most famous part is Henry VIII. Everyone knows about Henry VIII and his 6 wives. The song that you would hear coming in, Greensleeves, it's apocrypha probably that he wrote that about Anne Boleyn, his second wife, but there's not a lot of info to back that up, really, as you were looking at.
Yeah, there's no real evidence for or against it. Most surmise that Greensleeves came about during the Elizabethan period of the Tudor time period.
Mm-hmm. And so the leaders, this is an important period for England at the time because this is really the renaissance of going from the Middle Ages to modern times. You have the dissolution of the abbeys at the time, where where the Catholic Church was banned and created the Anglican Church, which so Henry could marry Anne Boleyn, but it also changed how people view everything as well. You come less and less from the fear and the church ruling everything to things starting to change and modernize. So one of the things we have here is the Tudor home, and it's very distinctive because of the timbers and the white part, which is called wattle and daub. Wattle and daub is an old technique of making homes and fences or any structure, really. I mean, you see this going back to Alfred the Great and back. So what would happen is they would take a very bendable stick, willow is one of the woods they would use, and they would bend it between these poles and create a wall, and then they would cover that wall with daub, which is manure, mud, and I think a bit of water, and to create that wall. And they would put that in between the timbers. Brick was really, really expensive at this time to make. You don't really see brick houses in England really being mass-produced until Victorian times.
And even then, a lot of brick that you see during this time period was usually the first floor. So brick really didn't make its way to the second floor until your manor lords towards the end of Henry VIII's time period. A lot of castles and homes that were built during his time period or that he took and gave to his friends were made of all brick.
Yeah, there's stories of people coming in. He would Cardinal Wolsey is the famous story of this, where he saw Cardinal Wolsey had built this beautiful home, and this is before the dissolution and the change to Anglican. And he's still trying to get Wolsey to get a divorce from Catherine of Aragon for him. And he sees this home that Wolsey had built and loved it so much that Wolsey felt obligated to give him that house.
Quote unquote obligated.
Yes.
Another big thing that comes up here on the facade of the house, you see a lot of windows. Glass panes were definitely expensive, and oftentimes when they changed houses, they would take their glass with them.
And that's why you see the panes as so small, because of how glass was made. And in between that is lead. So, because lead was mined at this time, and it was usually something that farmers would do on the off time.
So kind of like people stripping bronze and copper from homes.
Yeah, but they would actually go into the mines and mine it as a way to make extra money. This is also the time where you really see pigs coming into favor as being from farmers. Sheep farming has always been the staple of the English economy, and they would raise the wool and then send it over to Europe to be turned into textiles. And this is when you start seeing pigs being influenced. Most of their farming was done by oxen at this time. Horses weren't even being used. So, I mean, it's still a really almost primitive time that's just starting to modernize.
Yeah, now a couple other things on the facade. Obviously the wood between the panels as well as the door. We used walnuts. Walnut was used at the time. However, the primary wood that was used at the time is oak. However, in this game, there's really just not that many great oak options. So we went with the walnut. And
you would have to pay to go into the forest to take that, or would have to pay a lumber.
Yeah, you pay like the manor lord or the king,
depending on it. If it was at the time when the monasteries were still open, there was a lot of contract farmers from monasteries at the time, and you would have to pay the monastery to use it. But you were allowed to get a bundle, so much of the sticks and such. That was allowed as part of your tenancy.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a look inside here. So another one of the key things as we kind of take a look inside is going to be a lot of woodwork. A lot of wood etching occurred inside the home at the time. And so you can see we have the different patterns and etchings with the woodwork, and then also adding in patterns all throughout. And then in classic Tudor style, the ceiling with all the wood beams being exposed, nice and neat, even, keeled all throughout, and then continuing that pattern throughout the whole home.
A funny story is after Anne Boleyn was executed, Henry tried to erase her from history books. But there is, in one of the castles, there is still an H and an A for Henry and Anne still in the wood paneling.
That's funny. Another big feature of the homes, they didn't really have pictures, so they have tapestries. This tapestry is actually a very famous one during Tudorian period. I still don't understand why there's a unicorn on it, but...
Unicorns were a symbol of prowess, especially the horn. It was also a symbol of Christ.
Good to know. Now I know.
So tapestries were used, but tapestries were expensive. That's all hand embroidery. I do embroidery. That's thousands of hours of embroidery done there. Another thing that they would use is camera obscura, I think it's what it's called. It was used mainly by a lot of the Renaissance painters. Hans Holbein is thought to have used it. And it's that flipping of the image that they use, and they would trace it out. And if you were poor, you would have maybe like that, as in someone in the village had known how to do that, and they would paint it with just local paints. A lot of they would put up a lot of these beautiful paintings that were done by local artists, and usually they were local legends. St. George fighting the dragons, a very common one you'll find in houses at the time.
Awesome. Well, now I know what the unicorn's for.
It is a symbol of Christ. I actually just learned that.
So, as you can see, we've added a few modern pieces into this place just to give it a little bit of a modern edge, so you can actually stay here as kind of a retreat or a weekend cottage. We do have lots and lots of copies of Pride and Prejudice.
So that's an Easter egg for me. Pride and Prejudice is my second favorite novel. They didn't have Jane Eyre, which is my favorite novel in the game, but whenever you see that, it's actually a nod to me.
It's on every house I make.
So with the kitchens, this is obviously a modern feature of the home. At the time, this is where we're first seeing fireplaces and chimneys being built. So most of the cooking was done in a fire pit in the middle of a big open area. You see a lot of sinusitis in people from this time. They see evidence of it when they look at the skulls and stuff. But there was a hole in the top of the home where all the smoke came out of. Chimneys at this time and fireplaces are, some of them can be dangerous if they're not built correctly. The smoke just builds and builds and goes nowhere. So you can, they're very, very expensive at this time. So most people are really, especially in the early areas, under Henry VII, are just cooking over that pit.
Yeah, thankfully with modern age, I can add a vent instead of a hole in the ceiling.
And as you had pointed out the other day when we were talking about this, you could tell how wealthy someone was by how many chimneys you saw.
It's like status symbol, like how many chimneys you got.
As was glass in your windows.
All right, so moving up to second floor here, we go up the winding steps here. And up here at the top, we have just a nice simple hall closet here. Again, with all the etchings and carvings everywhere. And then over here to the side, we added in a bathroom along with a washer and dryer stack. Again, with all the wood etchings and carvings. Green and red were kind of two colors that you did see during this time period, so I've made sure to weave that through, even through the modern appliances with the green.
You know, I'm not sure how vivid the green was or how long the green would last, because during the Victorian period, you had a green that was made from arsenic that was thought to last longer, but of course it's very deadly and all of that. But that wouldn't have been around at this time, so I'm not quite sure how often they would have to replace that green.
So if we took a shower, we'd probably die.
No, not at this time. 400 years later, yes.
Okay. All right, so bouncing out of the bathroom, we do have the bedroom here. And here we've added in the canopy bed, which was very common at the time. And if my memory serves me right, the main bed was the biggest bed, the best bed in the house was given to guests.
I don't know. I mean, guests would sleep with them as well.
That's not creepy.
Yeah, in most houses the family slept together, and guests would sleep in bed with them. I'm not sure if it's at this time or if it's a little before this, but guests would actually sleep with them. And the reason they have these canopy beds is everyone almost slept in the same room. It wasn't just the spouses sleeping together and no one else. You would have, in a typical room, you would have the family, probably in the upper classes is which I mostly know of, and where most of the research really is, because that's where we have most of the evidence, is that if this was, say, the king's bed, the king would be sleeping in bed, the cupboards would be closed because that would be his bed, and there'd be several servants sleeping in the room with him. Kings were very rarely alone. That's why when Anne Boleyn, when the charges of adultery came up, that's why a lot of historians know they cannot be real, because of how many people were just around her all the time.
Wild. Now to add a little bit to this, we put in a built-in wardrobe here, and then also built in a nice little area here for your desk and hutch. And again, you cannot have enough copies of Pride and Prejudice. And if you're not aware, there is a fun little Easter egg in the game that you can actually read books, and that gives you a little bit of a cover to the book. And every book in the game actually has that these days.
No, I'm surprised it's not the message about how every man with a fortune is looking for a wife, or something to that. I don't have the exact line memorized, but basically every man of good fortune is in need of a wife, and I'm surprised that isn't there because it's almost in the first couple paragraphs of the book. The most famous lines from it.
All right, so coming out of the house again, just to take a look a little bit at the yard here. Again, we put this together as a country cottage. One thing to also note is that the front does extend out. That's not necessarily something you would have seen in the country. You would have seen that a lot more in the cities, mostly because you weren't taxed by the square footage of your second floor, but only your first floor. And so they would extend the house beyond that. And in some pictures you see of London at this time, you see houses where like people on the second floor can literally open up their window and shake hands with the person across the street.
So this was how pretty much London looked up until 1666 when the Great Fire of London happened. And the reason why after this there was building codes to this, that they couldn't build so close together like that, because they figured that was one of the reasons why the fire moved so quickly through the city. But most of London would have looked like this prior to 1666.
Yeah. And probably some colors too. We still see some of these kind of Tudorian homes actually today, like some of the old school ones that have been around since, like in even in Denmark, and you see them. They'll actually have the doors red. I don't know why, but it's absolutely gorgeous. I'll have to show you some pictures of some time. So keeping with the garden theme, we have a little stream coming through here. A proper English garden would have had a mixture of herbs, wild kind of growth, as well as fruits and vegetables. They don't have any fruits and vegetables in the game, but in this case we just kind of went with an overgrowth kind of garden.
At the time, what we considered weeds would have been used as food. It would have been used as medicine during Tudor times. Around Lent, the reason why you sort of it was helpful that you were fasting at the time was because food was scarce at the time, because this is before growing period and right after winter where most of your stocks were gone. So there's a lot of weeds that pop up at this time that they would have eaten and would have used as medicine.
Yeah, and of course lavender throughout. There's lavender everywhere. And then last but not least, we have a just nice little garden swing, just to kind of take in the environment and have a nice relaxing getaway and enjoy kind of the Tudorian meets modern cottage. So with that, I just want to say thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed, learned a few things, and if we got anything wrong, please let us know in the comments, and we'll talk to you next time.
Right. Thanks.